It's our 87th year, as you can see from the banner at the front, and we're still here. It's not always easy. We struggle to survive at times. So first of all, I'd like to thank Unite, especially for helping sponsor this meeting, and the RMT, my own union, which sponsored today's paper to give to delegates. My name's Bob Oram. I chair the Management Committee of the Morning Star, a committee that represents the shareholders of the cooperative that owns the Morning Star, a cooperative that was set up after the war and celebrates its 69th anniversary this year. Today, in 1948, was the day that the first Fighting Fund column appeared in the paper, September the 12th. So it's quite an historic day. But sadly, we still need that Fighting Fund to survive. So it is important, your support and your being here today. And we've got a great lineup, we've got a great subject. And at the moment, there is a lot happening within the movement. We're stronger than before, I think, at the moment. The political climate is such that we have new opportunities out there, and we've seen a resurgence within unions of organising amongst the workforce. And I think with a leader of the Labour Party, who was a columnist in the Morning Star for many years, and hopefully a leader in Scotland, who is a current columnist in the Morning Star shortly, we can see a political arena in which the Labour movement can start to develop better than it has done in the past. And I think that's one of the key issues that we're going to talk about today. And obviously one of those areas is in respect of fighting cuts, fighting austerity, and fighting privatisation. And one of the key battlegrounds in that struggle is in education. A new union is on that stage at the moment, and I think that's going to make a huge difference within education. And it gives me a great pleasure to welcome our first speaker, Louise Regan, who is one of the vice presidents of the new National Education Union. Louise.
Okay, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm actually the joint president of the National Education Union and the president of the National Union of Teachers section of the National Education Union. Well, I rarely say all of that because it takes far too long, but it's a real honour to be here, and obviously our union and lots of our members are very involved in the Morning Star and very committed to the work that you do. I will start with an apology. I am going to dash off after I've spoken. That isn't because I don't want to listen to anybody else, because with a panel of speakers like that, why wouldn't you want to stop here? But I had already committed to speaking at another Fringe meeting before, so I do apologise that I won't be able to stay and listen. But I think this is a really important debate that we're having, and in fact, I've just been talking to Ronnie about managing to finally recruit my daughter to a union based on the good work that his union has done at McDonald's. So, I think it was a real achievement. I was very proud. Got up very early in the morning, just over a week ago, to go and stand on a picket line with McDonald's workers. And we need more of that happening in this country. And it's really important, the work that people are doing with some of those unions with workers who are on very low pay, very precarious contracts, and it's a real achievement to have got there. So, congratulations to Ronnie. I'm sure he'll continue to do lots of work, and just hopefully we'll have a picket line in Nottingham at some point. That's what I'm aiming for as the next thing. But anyway, so I'm here to talk about the education union and what we've been doing. So the NUT, as a union prior to us joining up, moved from a position of being a servicing union to an organising union, just like many of the other trade unionists here. We recognised, particularly for us around work that happened in Chicago with the Chicago Teachers Union, that there was a real opportunity to start to get out and engage, rather than just dealing with members' issues in the workplace, but actually to start to engage, talk about what impacts for them, start to have small wins, but the aim is to build into bigger wins, but involving other people in your campaigns. So it's no good just us looking in as a union at what's happening for us. It's important that we engage with other people and starting to build links. And really, our funding campaign was based on that, and actually started off as being aware that there was an issue for our members in terms of funding cuts in school, but very quickly rolled into being aware that that impacted on a lot of unions in the education sector, but also, and more importantly, impacted on our students and on the parents of those students and on communities, because education is the start for everybody really. So despite what the government says about not being able to afford it, what we all know is if we don't invest in our young people and invest in educating them, the long-term impacts of that are very dire. So education should not be seen as a burden on our society, it should be seen as an investment in our future, and that's really what I think we have to keep saying. So it is expensive to educate people, but it's important that we do that. So we built a campaign around the school cuts website really, and that campaign focused on drawing in other unions that it impacted on, but it also focused on very important data. So our website was set up with data that we knew was solid in terms of where it came from, and we know that schools have for a few years been facing cuts, but we're facing very significant cuts with what the government was proposing. So we're already in a position where we see schools who are saying, oh, we can't afford to put on that subject, we can't afford to do art anymore. So a friend of mine, their child was starting secondary school last year, and the school, right at the last minute, said we can't afford to do drama anymore. That was the one subject that their child was really interested in doing at that school, and it was just gone. There was no drama provision at the school at all. And some of those art subjects are actually what keeps some children in school. If they're not an academic child, being able to go to an art lesson or go to a music lesson or do a bit of drama is what really helps to keep you in school, because you have something that engages you. So we know that they're really important. But it wasn't just about cuts to that, it was also about cuts to staff in schools. So we know there's been an increasing attack, particularly on support staff in school. And there's been some brilliant challenges to some of that by the Durham and Derby TAs actually, because there's been big attacks on their pay and conditions, which as a union we fully supported them in their campaign to challenge that. But we know we've lost a lot of support staff in our school. So we're already seeing a falling number, and that will have a long-term impact in the support, particularly for the most vulnerable young people in our school. So again, that's a real opportunity for us to engage with parents and students about their needs. But also, we've seen increasing class sizes, and that impacts on teachers' workload. So all of those things together, we knew would enable us to build a campaign. And then a general election was announced, and we thought that that would be a real key focus for us as a union, to build a campaign during the general election to really target and focus our members and communities on the education funding cuts. And the evidence of that campaign was that we had an impact. We know that there were significant numbers of people who indicated that they changed how they voted in the general election purely based on state education as a key factor in how they voted. So, some of the things that we did alongside setting up the School Cuts website was building capacity out in our local associations and divisions and getting them out, engaging with people, setting up stalls, leafleting, community events. So we had a lot of carnivals, a lot of picnics, and people came out in force really to some of those things. Big turnouts, lots of people engaged and lots of people interested. So we know that if you build those sort of campaigns around a social media campaign, but not purely social media, so we had a lot of work done on the School Cuts website, which we rolled out through social media, but we did a lot of face-to-face talking to people. We had members out on the street every weekend giving out leaflets. We had young teachers who were designing their own leaflets because they were saying, we want to talk to people in our community about what it's going to be like in my school, not about what it's going to be like nationally. We want people to come and talk to us about what's happening in our local schools. And I spoke at a meeting, and some young teachers said to me, we did our own leaflet, and we were giving them out in the town centre. People were walking past, looking at the leaflet, turning around and coming back to say to us, is this really going to happen in our school? So we know that we started to get a lot of support that way. So, in terms of that, we know it was a successful campaign in raising awareness and having an impact in the election. This government has announced that they'll put more funding into education. We don't believe that there will be significant amounts of new funding for education. And we think it's really important that we continue to campaign. So last weekend we had activist training day. We've got activists from up and down the country in London and train them on the new website, how it's going to look, on the things that they can do to get out and campaign in their locality. Because we can't, as a union, just direct from headquarters. That will not work. There's no point us just sending out emails saying we need you to do this. We need our grassroots members saying to us, this is what we need. We need this in our locality. We need you to send us these materials. This is the stuff we're doing, and sharing that out. And only by engaging and getting all of those young teachers, all of those communities involved and back in our campaign do we have a real chance of changing the funding crisis. Thank you.
It's obviously been a cycle of meetings and speeches since last week. But you know, it isn't me that people should be proud of. It's those young workers in McDonald's who they should be proud of, who had the bottle to get together, to join a union, and more importantly, to take action against a repressive regime like McDonald's is. And maybe I will talk about that. I just want to say that because we're talking, you know, the theme of the meeting is about how we, you know, the Labour, how we're taking Labour forward in this country. I've got to say, I'm still smiling from June in the election. You know, when I got in and I listened to that exit poll, I got in, I was absolutely exhausted and sat down and, you know, wait to 8 to 10 o'clock and it came on and I couldn't believe it. Because of all the, you know, the rubbish that had been in the press for month after month, telling us about the next time it's going to be a landslide, how Jeremy Corbyn was going to be finished, how the Labour Party were going to be ground into the ground. And I was thinking, what's life going to be like? What are we going to do as a movement that's going to change those sort of things? The one thing I will say about Jeremy Corbyn now is we're going to do it for copyright, because the £10 an hour was our motion, the TUC. The 0 hour contract was our motion at the TUC, and he's copied them. Now I think there's money available there, which will go into our strike point. It's absolutely amazing what Jeremy and his team have brought to the country. They've given new confidence. So, you know, I put a lot of what happened at McDonald's down to the confidence that's been bred into the country by Jeremy Corbyn. A totally different style of leadership. In the past, we've had people who make us promises after promises after promises, and we're still waiting for them. We get stuff through the TUC, we pass Congress motions. We've all been around a while, and they never happen. Nothing ever happens, it seems to sit there. But Jeremy Corbyn's actually said, we're going to do it. And you know, he is going to do it. And he's going to do it with us. And what that's doing, that is instilling confidence in people to just take that extra step. You've seen by the amount of people who've joined the Labour Party, this dying party that was going to be never again. We've got more people now joining trade unions, and I wish somebody would stop phoning me because it's buzzing in my pocket. But well, all the stuff that they're talking about is the things that we are passionately waiting for. You know, I've been a member of the Labour Party for over 40 years. And Jeremy Corbyn is the leader that I've been waiting for all that time. You know, I've never had anyone where I could have absolute confidence in what they were saying, because you knew they were going to put stuff in. I mean, Tony Blair was as nice as pie when he was looking for my vote in the election, and I went out to campaign for him. And I believe he betrayed our movement. He absolutely betrayed it, because he could have took away the anti-trade union legislation that had been put in by Thatcher. None of that happened. So I think we got betrayed by Labour movement. Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, Ian Labour, and all the rest of the shadow cabinet are saying now what they're going to do, and you know that they absolutely mean they're going to do it. I know that our members will enjoy, and some of the lowest paid workers, when you talk about precarious work, it doesn't come any more precarious than working for a company like McDonald's, because they're not anywhere near £10. If they're going to go from £4.05 an hour at the bottom to £10, that is a massive difference to their lives and the way that they work. It might stop some of them. The young boy who came yesterday, one of the strikers, is homeless. He actually sleeps on the floor of one of the other McDonald's workers because he can't afford property anywhere. He can't afford rent because he's on such low wages. They're going to get a ban on 0 hour contracts. And I hope they don't come up with the Ed Miliband thing, which is we're going to ban 0 hour contracts and we're going to give, you know, people have a minimum of 1 hour. Well, that's just a bloody saying. We have to have meaningful contracts for people that mean that they get you know, an end. Because £10 an hour means nothing if you've only got an hour's work. It has to be meaningful contracts that these people get. And of course, the cap that they're talking about putting on employers, and I would love to see that. I mean, it won't affect me because I don't earn that much more than what my own members earn. But I'll tell you what, in McDonald's, the chief executive earns $15.1 million a year, $8,000 per hour, and he has well, it does matter him that he can say that he's going to pay people £4.5p. That people in America were earning $6 to $7 an hour. It is an absolute travesty of a company that pays, you don't count their profits in millions, they count their profits in billions. And yet people are on the brink of starvation. Wage poverty right across the world. One thing I will say about those American workers, you know, and it's strike action that's done it, they have now lifted, because some of the states have given $15 an hour, they've got it through their campaigns, their strike action, being arrested, being thrown in jail. All the stuff they do has lifted 11 million people out of poverty in America. And that's something that we should all be thankful for, because that is what we're going to do here. We're looking to increase what we do. One thing I will say about Labour, and it's harking back to last year, we're never going to change the Labour Party inside unless we stop all this infighting. The right have had their go, and I've got to say, they failed. Let the left of the Labour Party, the common sense part of the Labour Party, take the party forward. You can't have people thrown out of the Labour Party. I was suspended last year for a month because I called somebody a traitor in a tweet. But everybody sings the red flag. We use the word traitor in every verse. Nobody got thrown out for that. So I get thrown out for traitor, and some people have been thrown out for a lot less. And yet people like Jess Phillips MP can say, I wouldn't stab Jeremy in the back, I'd stab him in the front. Well, that's worse than what I said. That's worse than what 100,000 people said. We've got to now give an amnesty to these people. We've got to allow them back into the Labour Party. We've got to use them to campaign for victory of a Labour government in the future. A government that's going to change the lives of millions of people forever. Comrades, we need to start organising now. We need to mobilise out on the streets, go on the knocker, going around and making sure that we get people in. And if these MPs don't like it, if the Jess Phillipses of this world, the Chucker Mooners and Blair and all them don't like it, then bugger off somewhere where they like it. Let's have our party back. It was formed through the trade union movement. Let's get it back, and we'll champion the cause of working people in the future.
I was surprised to see that the Morning Star had elevated me to being an expert in social care, because I think I'm very far from that. I am a trade unionist who has had to start to learn about this, because in unison we represent these workers. And the first thing I'd like to say is probably ask you to forget everything you think you know about social care. You're probably still thinking about council home helps or council care homes, but frankly that's just two 1980s. Carers haven't changed. They're still committed to socially responsible care and profession, committed to quality care, but whether it's residential or domiciliary care, it's no longer a service, it's an industry. There are 18,000 organisations now in that field, and they go from everything from a corner shop operation to private equity operations. 1.5 million jobs. There are still a small number in the public sector, but cuts in local authority funding have been the driver towards privatisation. Every time the cuts bite deeper and deeper, councils look towards contracting as a way of keeping the costs down. And some of the rates for caring are as low as £9 and £10 an hour. And from that you start to subtract shareholder profits, executive salaries and the costs of contracting, which are obviously are all a drain in the public funding. So you see there is an intrinsic link between the price at which the councils contract and commission services and the level of pay paid to carers, and that cycle continues. So you see it here in this local authority area of Brighton, where there is not a single public sector care home, but privatisation has created private sector millionaires. The raw material of this industry is frankly care workers, predominantly female, predominantly middle-aged. But it is a sector in which the relationship between employers and workers is tilted in favour of the employers. Whether it's bogus self-employment in the field of personal assistance or zero-hours contracts, They're deliberately designed to sidestep the framework of employment law. So we see carers missing out on employment rights and protections, including sick pay and maternity pay, or even the right to enrolment in a pension. I don't think anybody doubts that all zero-hours contracts are exploitative, but they're particularly pernicious in social care. Many contracts will only pay for the contact time between the carer and the client. And all too often that contact time is 15 minutes. And if you want to see the absurdity of trying to deal with an elderly person in their own home in a 15-minute visit, just have a look at the Unison website where there's a rather good video about it. So for 6 minutes in the morning, the carer might be paid for 90 minutes. But those 6 visits are very unlikely to even be in the same street. But the contracts do not pay travel time. It's illegal. We tell them it's illegal, but they still do not pay it, leading to the fact that many carers actually have wage rates that are below the national minimum wage, not the living wage, the minimum wage. We also have contracts where they have been known to provide loans for private transport where the travelling is onerous. But some of those loans are at rates that would even make payday loan companies blush. And one requirement for being a care worker, of course, is that you will have a mobile phone, very common in zero-hours contracts. Who pays for it? The carer. I think one of the really common themes among the cases that Unison has taken up is that care workers can't even tell from their pay slips what hours they've actually been worked. And we have, any of our surveys, at least 2/3 of the people will say that they think their pay slips are deliberately vague and misleading. Now we all know that the minimum wage regulation is a function called carried out by HMRC, but our experience is that investigations are superficial and too many employers are allowed to self-correct. So there's no naming and shaming and no fines for non-compliance. And for the employers to get away with this, failing to maintain national minimum wage records, that is absolutely the heart of what we're talking about. And if one worker complains, as you might know, the remedy is individual. They don't look if that's the pattern throughout the company. And the route to complain for the individual care worker is difficult because obstacles have been put in their way of actually trying to check records and pay. And on a zero-hours contract, the one thing you know is that if you complain, your 0 hours might go down to 0 hours. So if you want to challenge the loss of hours, you're in a position where you're unable to claim unfair dismissal, as technically you've not lost your job. So care staff are kept in poverty and in the most precarious terms and conditions. I think a decent floor of employment rights would be a start, but I do have to say organising in the care sector has its own difficulties, not least because of the anti-trade union attitudes, but it combines with the absolute nature of the workplace. That's our basic unit of organisation, but for many care workers, they can go for weeks and weeks and weeks without even seeing a colleague. So we have special difficulties trying the organising challenge in this sector. And I mean, recently in Unison Scotland, we got a complaint from another union about poaching. And they couldn't understand why Unison had taken a stand in a shop front in a shopping centre. But we were able to reassure them that we weren't trying to move into that sector. It was the only way we had at actually being able to contact social care workers on a regular basis. I think if it's going to not remain a Cinderella service with low pay and terrible conditions, trade unions must be involved. I think that means a right to organise, it means a right to represent. And while we are currently working for the adoption of a real living wage, I think the only real answers are in an improvement of collective bargaining across the industry and new sectoral bargaining arrangements. Only then will social care actually become a profession where the caring skills of the workforce are recognised and rewarded, preferably, I would say, in a national care service. With an ageing population, it's reckoned that another 1 million carers will be needed over the next 10 years. I think it would be absolutely shameful if that was to be provided in the back of an exploited workforce on poverty pay. And personally, I have to say that I'm hopeful if Richard Leonard becomes leader of the Labour Party in Scotland, we may be able to see some progress on the issue, at least in one part of the UK.
I think you'll find that you're seeing all the speculation about prison officer pay is going to break through the cap and so forth. Well, I've just been informed, actually, and I've been doing some media in relation to it. Our response is absolutely clear. Inflation is running at 2.9%. Anything below that inflation rate is a pay cut from our members. That's a reality. Now, there's been lots of speculation going on that for police and prison officers, they were going to make this great big announcement. Well, they have made the announcement. And I can tell you the majority of our members will get a massive 1.3%. That's a reality, so I don't know what the rest of the public sector is going to get, but 1.3%. I've made it clear on the BBC, and I've been making it clear with my colleagues that this is a pay cut, it's not acceptable, and our executive will be looking to coordinate action where we can with other trade unions in the run-up to this. But just in relation to this, the Fringe is about where next for the Labour movement. And like we've heard from Ronnie Draper, the reality is Theresa May got a bloody nose because she thought she was going to wipe out Labour in that last election. And I've got to confess, I'm a big Jeremy Corbyn fan, John McDonnell fan, and so forth. But I was worried as well, I've got to say, because of the internal fighting within the Labour Party. And I've got to say, to those who do not like the democratic process of the elections twice of Jeremy Corbyn now, go away and form another party. Because as far as I'm concerned, Jeremy is the Labour Party leader. His manifesto was a progressive one, probably one of the best manifestos that we've seen since 1945. Behind the scenes, Jeremy isn't afraid to even talk to unions who are not affiliated to the Labour Party. And I had some very decent conversations with both Jeremy and John McDonnell, who incidentally we made an honorary life member in 2007 because of the work that he'd done for us over a sustained period of time. Jeremy Corbyn was the same. He was backing the POA as far back as 1994 against the draconian Criminal Justice and Public Order Act, Section 127, that restricts POA members from taking legitimate action. He campaigned as well against the first private prison in operation in Britain when it was G4S, or Group 4 at that time, getting the Wolds prison up in Humberside. So the reality is Jeremy Corbyn has always aligned himself with trade unions and he's never been ashamed to do so. And I think that is a major, major step forward, and I'm looking forward to hearing him this afternoon when he comes to address Congress. He's a man of the people that gets out and speaks to the people. The young go to him and flock round him because they like what his policies are, and they are the future young people. You know, you look at that McDonald's strike the other week, that was tremendous. I mean, I was doing a Fringe meeting yesterday, and some of those kids who were on the picket lines and taking that strike action being paid £4.5p an hour on 0-hour contracts, not knowing when they're going to get additional work and so forth. That race to the bottom has got to stop. And what we're trying to do as well is to pull the public sector down to that level as well. What we need to do collectively, working together as general secretaries and executives and through trades councils and different things, is to work together, because I know that David Barrett and his members, 100,000 members, I'm sure he'll speak on that, but their fight is our fight as well, for a decent public service. And that's what we should be doing. So I was pleased that the composite motion went through, but I've been here before over the last 7 or 8 years when composite motions have gone through and then it gets kicked into the long grass. We cannot allow that to happen any longer. My union finds itself under a permanent injunction at this moment in time. But we will find new initiatives to take forward. The sections of our membership that can be balloted for industrial action, a vital cog in the wheel, our operational support grades. We've got 4,000 of them. They play a vital part in the prison service, and we will be doing an indicative ballot to see if those members are prepared to take action in respect of the pay announcement in relation to this. We will also do an indicative ballot, because it's the policy of our union to actually ballot each year once the pay review body has indeed given its recommendations. So we'll ballot our members to see what their views are in relation to prison officers as well. While I'm on the subject of pay review bodies, we will not give evidence to the pay review body for the prison service, because they're selected by government, they're paid by government, and they have a remit from government. So they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. There might be nice individuals that have been selected, but we have no confidence in them. Now, when they took our right to strike away, we were supposed to have compensatory mechanisms for resolving disputes and pay. I would much rather go back to collective bargaining in relation to pay, because we have no confidence in what we've got. So the reality is, I said 7 years ago when I first came on the General Council about pay review bodies, and I was sort of shouted down a little bit that some of the pay review bodies are doing good work for their unions. But let's put it where it is. You cannot replace collective bargaining with a pay review body that gives a recommendation. I understand that some of the unions who don't like the outcome of the pay review body, different from us, they can then ballot the members for strike action. But I'm sure those unions that come under the remit of pay review bodies would much prefer sectoral collective bargaining. It makes you stronger, makes it more effective, and that's what we should be planning for. So, where next for the labour movement indeed? And I'll finish on this. I think the time has come for all unions coming together. Whether we keep hearing pensions was going to be the issue that would unite all the unions. It did to a certain extent, but then certain trade unions looked after their own, which I fully understand. I fully understand. There's got to come a time now, specifically on pay, where we've got to have coordinated campaigns, coordinated action where possible, and let's mean it, doing it collectively. So we've got an executive meeting of our MEC on Thursday, and that will be on the agenda about indicative ballots for our operational support grades, and we will try and coincide it with those other unions that are doing their ballots as well. The balloting thresholds we shouldn't see as a problem, because if we campaign effectively, get into workplaces, tell our members that it's important to get over those thresholds, and that way we're engaging with our members wholeheartedly, and at a time that, because this government are weak, this government is so weak, I think we can push them over the cliff and get rid of them, and get another general election, and hopefully see a Jeremy Corbyn-led government. Thank you.
I'm a supporter of that position that more people should join the Labour Party, but I do actually think it's absolutely crucial that the Morning Star continues, and we're going to be having a chat with Ben and the team to see what other ways we can support this, because I think this is about the workers' agenda. It's not just about waiting for a Labour government, it's about what we do. I was asked a few times recently, after the general election result, was, you know, did we feel vindicated? We were one of the first unions that came out publicly in support of Corbyn, and I made a statement one night that sort of took off, which was there's a virus in Labour and Corbyn is the antidote. And our former General Secretary, Alan Johnson, didn't like it too much, but it was true. Maybe he was part of it, I don't know. And take that bit out. Look, he's always having a go at me, so it's all right. Look, when we think about where next for Labour, I can't help thinking about where next for the trade union movement. And one of the things that I feel all the time now is that you can't argue with the fact that Corbyn's Labour is delivering a new kind of politics. He's put forward a transformative manifesto, which is the most radical any of us have ever seen, and he is building a mass movement. And the question that I would pose to my colleagues and other trade union leaders and comrades is this, well, what are we going to do? What's our role now? Because this is the best platform that we've ever had to reassert trade union values in society. And I think we've been comfortable for many years, people like me and other leaders, we spend a lot of our time telling Labour what they need to do to get back to representing working people. My view is very simple. We now need to do what we need to do to get back to working, representing people and coming together as a trade union movement. We've got a postal dispute. Ballot papers go out on Thursday morning from our headquarters by post. And we're very confident, don't want to sound complacent, but we're very confident that we're going to get a good yes vote, and we're very confident that we'll beat the threshold. And this is going to be, I think it's probably the first of the nationwide ballots under the new Tory laws. And one of the things that I mentioned it speaking earlier this morning, when we look at the Tory laws, I agree with what a number of people have said. You cannot allow the Tory laws to stop us representing people if you're in a dispute. So I accept that there might be a moment where we have to say, well, actually, we're not accepting that. But the other side of it is this. It has forced us to engage with our members in a way that we've never done before. And I've got to say, social media has become a fantastic opportunity to do that. The first dispute that we've been involved in where social media can play a great part. And the evidence of that was there yesterday. I had a bit of a surreal experience. I went out and met our members in Brighton delivery office at 8 o'clock in the morning. And the whole office, about 180 of them, came out on the street. We didn't want to go in there. The management at the bottom of it, they offered us the chance to go in the office because they didn't want to see me outside. No, we said they're coming out to see us. But at the same time, we called it National Gate Meeting Day. And we had over 800 offices post photos on social media, all the same, with postal workers all congregated outside their offices, all saying, we're voting yes. I tell you, that's another powerful image. And it does not give you a lot of confidence that clearly some of the messages there are getting through. Privatisation of the post office was something that, in truth, happened because all political parties at some point, all mainstream political parties at some point in the recent future, in the recent past, had supported privatisation, including Labour. And prior to that, Labour took us into liberalisation way in advance of the rest of Europe. And that, although it kind of goes under the radar, has caused us enormous problems. Because what's happened with that is, one end you've got, as our Deputy General Secretary said today, nearly £1 billion. We were told, under this report, that privatisation was going to bring investment, it was going to secure the future of the industry. What it's done is sucked out nearly £1 billion in just 3 years that could have been used for investment, has gone to hedge funds mostly. That's the reality of it. So there's no investment, short-termism, we all know that debate. What goes under the radar is liberalisation a little bit. Because what that's done is it's put a regulator in charge of Royal Mail that is on a relentless drive to put pressure on our members to improve their efficiency. And there's no getting away from it. The debate is, our members work bloody hard. They're working harder and harder like all workers everywhere in the country, but it's never enough. And the reason is this, is that the regulator is comparing efficiency on the basis of labour costs. And it's looking round the sector that we're in, which unfortunately is predominantly an unorganised sector, particularly in the parcels market, and we need to do something about that. And it's saying, well, how comes they can operate like that? And you have to have that. So we've spent years setting the benchmark, high benchmark on pay terms and conditions. And what this dispute is really about now is that Royal Mail is being pressurised to improve their efficiency. They compare it sometimes with other postal administrations across Europe. It's just like every time they call them in, where did this start? How did that happen? So, you know, we're going to fight against this. We're going to fight to protect our members' jobs, and it will be an important dispute. The two other things I want to say, though, is we've come here this week on a bit of a mission to keep repeating a couple of things. One is, let's get the movement together, but let's have a plan. And we've put together a plan that was in Comp 8, which has 4 simple points. We wanted it to be a standalone motion. It got caught in a comp, but it's the right comp. It was about the world of work. We want to make the world of work the #1 political issue in this country, because we think that's the way to unite workers, that's the way to get Labour in power. We also think that it's long overdue when you see what's happened to living standards of workers up and down the country. So our 4-point plan is this. Let's sit down as unions and agree a common bargaining agenda on how you tackle insecure employment and low pay. And Jane, in respect to care workers, let's not just talk about let's raise pay, let's talk about what people in society who offer nothing to society, like people who sit on boards, what they get. Let's bring that in the spotlight. We should revalue work in this country. Care workers are going to be crucial to our lives increasingly going forward. It is outrageous the pay that care workers get. And you've got these people on these boards who never ever grow anything in this country. They spend all their time smashing it up. And the business world think, oh, they're great businessmen. I came across one of them, Adam Crozier. And what he does, he's a classic. He writes his own scripts, and he leaves one business saying, he comes there saying it's the worst numbers I've ever seen, and he leaves saying it's the best there's ever been. The next person comes in and goes, it's the worst numbers I've ever seen. And they leave going, it's the best there's ever been. You've done it with ITV, you've done it well. So we've got to put the focus on them people as well, because they offer us nothing. So, agree a common bargaining agenda, 1. 2, let's publish a manifesto that can bring workers together in this country. That all workers can say, in that manifesto, we'll talk about what's in it, but let's be broad enough to say, we'll have a bit of that. Every single union in the country is fighting for a new deal for workers. The third thing is, in the first 6 months of next year, let's get 1 million workers out on the street. And as I said the other day, you know, there's some fantastic organisations in the labour movement who call demos. You could be out every Saturday and Sunday in our position speaking somewhere. But I want to be on a platform with other unions, and I want to be on a platform with the TUC, and I want to be on a platform where the trade union movement is leading that debate. And we've got to do that. And the fourth thing is, let's agree action that's deliverable. That was in that proposition. It got carried. By the way, it weren't in the first draft. You had to go back and make sure that it was in afterwards. And as I keep saying, you know, we all would love to see a general strike, but you've got to build towards things. We've got to learn the lessons of the past, that if we keep having that debate, it ends up, unfortunately, going nowhere. If you start on, well, what can we do? Don't let people off the hook. Because the people who really don't want to do that don't want to do anything. But when we start saying, well, actually, you must be able to do something. You must be able to go further than what you've ever been. So that 4-point plan is a plan that will bring this movement together. And we're going to keep on talking about it, and I hope the paper keeps publicising it. And then there's the debate about a new model of trade unionism, which we moved to proposition today. I'm going to say 3 things on that. Let's focus the TUC in a different role. I can see Sean, the RMT at the back there, not going to take sides in what happened there or anything, but what I do agree with, and your dispute, one of the lines in there was written in support of your dispute. The TUC's greatest role must be to coordinate unions in solidarity action in this country, and we've got to shift the TUC into that position. Mergers. I'm not against merger, but I am against takeover, and I think we've got something going on because of declining membership, where what's going on in the country at the moment in the union movement is a default position has come about, which is this, is unions merge increasingly for financial pressures. And all I'm saying is I don't know whether big is best, I don't know whether small is best. I do believe that you have to get closer to the workforce, and sometimes big takes you further away. So let's have that debate out in the open, because at the moment it's happening and we're not debating. And by putting on the table we need to do something different, I think we'll get there on that. And organising, I said that earlier on. You know, it's very confusing at the moment in our movement on organising. There are so many different unions trying to organise in every sector. And we've got to come together and say, is this about workers? Is this about what's the best for workers? Or is it about a particular union? And we want to have that debate in an open and honest way. And we're keen to do that. And what you can't have as part of that, because that's happening, as we're building pressure and unions are doing great things, you know, the truth is there are some employers who come under pressure and then they go, well, what we're going to do is we're going to choose what union who can come in it. You can't have that going on. So, you know, this is a time for great optimism. Corbyn's given us a platform. The key question for us now, in taking Labour forward, but in taking our movement forward, is what are we going to do about it? And I think you'll see, like colleagues on this platform, and right across our movement, you'll see people who are wising up to this now, who are ready to step up to that challenge, and we've got to deliver that in the coming weeks and months.
We've got a resurgent left in this country. We've got a huge number of people who are now interested in the left and the socialist ideas, and how are we as a movement going to respond to that? How are we going to build on that? How are we going to bring these people together and make sure that that leads to real change? It's an exciting time to be part of the movement. It's exciting because of what Jeremy Corbyn demonstrated at that election, when he proved that socialist ideas can resonate with millions of people, something that we had been told could not happen. But also exciting if we look at how that victory was achieved. Tony Blair specialised in beating the Tories at their own game. In the process, he did demonstrate that if you play the Tories' game, then working people lose even when the Labour Party wins. And so Jeremy Corbyn is winning by playing a different game, by refusing to play by the rules that are set by the boss class, by the establishment. And we saw overriding media, establishment hostility, smears, lies about Jeremy, about his team, about the Labour Party, overcome by a movement of hundreds of thousands of ordinary people organising in communities, going out, talking to people at work, talking to their friends, their families, and spreading that message of hope that Jeremy Corbyn was the sort of spokesperson for, a triumph of people power over corporate power. But we know that that mobilisation has to be built on, has to be matched by an industrial mobilisation on a scale that we haven't yet seen. That's partly because the struggle on the streets causes problems for the government, and if, as Steve says, we want an election as soon as possible, we want to be causing problems for the government, we want to keep putting them on the spotlight, which is why it's excellent that the Labour Party is doing that with the public sector pay in Parliament at the moment. It's partly because, of course, the struggle in the Labour Party isn't over. We know that not all the Labour Party are fans of Jeremy Corbyn. There are plenty of people who want to go back to the old way of doing things, and the trade union movement has a huge role to play in making sure that that forward movement in the Labour Party and that resurgence of the left is protected and extended. But it's mostly because working people shouldn't have to wait for Westminster to solve their problems. Most people spend most of their waking hours at work, and that's why I think Dave's absolutely right to say that we need to make the world of work the political issue of the day. One of the really refreshing things about Corbyn's Labour is the way that the new leadership of the Labour Party has been focused on empowering workers to deliver change for themselves. So we've seen pledges on raising the minimum wage, and that's very important, as we know, and that's a campaign that the BFAWU have done excellent work on. But we've also seen the Manifesto for Labour Law that was produced by the Institute for Employment Rights, with its concentration on unshackling the trade unions, on extending collective bargaining, so that workers rather than MPs are determining their rates of pay. I know that there are unions that are stepping up to this challenge, and we've had the privilege of listening to comrades from those unions at this session today. Really exciting stuff going on with the strike with the BFAWU, excellent innovative campaigning around the general election in the, by the NUT, which will surely continue in the NEU. We've got the amazing campaign to keep the guards on the train that the RMT is leading at the moment. We've got all these exciting ideas, but as Dave was saying this morning, in this morning's debate, we need to start sharing all of that expertise, bringing it together, coordinating it. All of this dynamic, innovative new trade unionism, developing new ways of organising is vital. But it's not just about winning a new deal for workers. That's not our only goal. Because by organising workers and getting them taking collective action against management, we develop an understanding of the fundamental conflict of interest between workers and capital. Relying on social partnership legislation or protection from institutions controlled by the ruling class, whether that's the European Union or the Westminster Parliament, is not going to deliver a world where workers rather than bosses call the shots. And I think that that's something that we can reflect on in the centenary year of the Russian Revolution, that our movement has been about changing the world for the better, and we need to start thinking about how we're going to do that. Being informed about the struggles of working people across the board and across the world, because we get a huge amount of misinformation about working people's struggles in other countries, a huge amount of slander, as we saw directed at Corbyn, but also directed at any people that dares to try and change the world. And we've seen that really disgracefully with Venezuela recently. That helps develop an understanding of how working people, why society is stacked against working people. And that's where I see the role of the Morning Star as really crucial. Because it is the only daily newspaper of the trade union movement, it is the only socialist newspaper in the English-speaking world, daily newspaper. But it's more than a newspaper, it's a tool for working people to educate, agitate, organise, bringing people together across the movement, inside and outside the Labour Party, for change. Now, I'm very well aware that we're talking about new ways of organising, we're talking about new ways of communicating with people, and the Morning Star has as much work to do on that front as any of the other organisations in the trade union movement, and that's why I'm very looking forward to meeting Dave and his social media guru, Chris Webb, tomorrow to talk about how we look at that aspect of it. The Morning Star is launching a new website this month. It is going to be following that up with a new look for the paper. But we do need to share that expertise as we're talking about, because everybody in this room, everybody in this movement can contribute to building a better Morning Star. Building a Morning Star that can really be the voice of working people, because without a Morning Star, that voice doesn't exist anywhere else in this country at the moment. So it is absolutely vital. I'm very grateful for Dave's kind words about the Morning Star earlier. It is absolutely vital that this paper keeps getting stronger, and it has been a good, since Jeremy came to power, it has been a good time for our paper. We have increased sales, but we are still, of course, facing, like the entire print industry, enormous problems in survival. So basically, stick with us. Let's work together to build our movement and build our paper. Thank you.
Obviously, the Communication Workers Union are big supporters of the Morning Star. Could you just sort of say a little bit about the importance of the role of the paper in the trade union struggle?
Well, I think it's more important than ever with the agenda that we're developing, that the Morning Star has the ability to continue to publish daily. I think you need to consider more how you do some online stuff and social media stuff. Because I think the agenda we're putting forward, the point I've been making a lot is fantastic that Corbyn's given us this platform, but now the trade union movement has to respond. And I believe that the Morning Star is in the best position to put out the agenda that's fighting for a new deal for workers and a new model of trade unionism in the UK.
Fantastic. And as you've said, CWU are currently balloting for industrial action. Can you just explain a little bit more about that? And you said that you're expecting a big yes vote.
Yeah, we're confident just by the response we're getting, but we're not complacent. And obviously we've got to continue to campaign hard. But postal workers' terms and conditions are under attack. Privatisation is adding to that. Previous bad decisions on liberalisation of the postal services create an unfair competition. Is that, but we're also there defending the service. We want the service to grow, we want it to innovate, and frankly, the way the company are acting at the moment is putting more and more pressure on frontline workers, relentless pressure. People ain't going to put up with that anymore, and we are going to take a stand on this. We're going to get a good deal. We've run a good campaign on 4 pillars of security, which our members are well aware of. So we're not just defending, we're also going on the offensive.
As been mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the PRA are part of the management committee of the Morning Star. Could you just explain a little bit about the support for the paper and its importance in the coming struggle?
Well, I think it's vitally important that we have a thriving Morning Star, because it is a paper of the left. It's a paper that gets information out to people on a factual basis, instead of the same old media that we see in the mainstream media. So that's why it's the voice of trade unions, it's the voice of the labour movement, and I think it's vitally important that collectively we keep the Morning Star thriving at its best.
Fantastic. And you mentioned in your speech about the paltry 1.3% payoff. Well, we kind of knew it was coming. So what are the next steps for the PRA?
Well, the reality is there are sections of our membership that we can legitimately ballot. And that's exactly what we will do, because I think it's vitally important that the trade union movement speak as one voice in this public sector pay cap, to be honest with you. And I don't think we should just keep it within the public sector, because there's, as we know, with McDonald's, Bart's Hospital, within the private sector, there are some ridiculous stuff going on with terms and conditions, 0-hour contracts, minimum wages, etc. Young people that because of their age they're getting paid, you know, £4, 5p. They've been exploited, they've been bullied, harassed at work. We heard from some of those strikers in McDonald's. So what we've got to have is a massive campaign with coordinated action where necessary, in order to improve the lives of working people and those people that don't have a voice. For example, the disabled, the unemployed, the elderly, those people that are getting damaged every day of the week in the communities that they live in. They've got to have a voice, and I would urge every single one of them to engage with trade unions, engage with trades councils, and they will find their voice and will be a lot stronger for it for future generations.
Wonderful. Great. Thanks very much, Steve.
You're very welcome.
We just wondered if you could explain a little bit about the importance of the role of the Morning Star, particularly in relation to the trade union movement and the coming struggles ahead.
I think it goes right to the heart of the fact that only the Morning Star actually provides any kind of factual view of what's actually happening within the trade union movement. I can't think of another newspaper that doesn't have bias in any industrial story that it produces. And I think that that's also backed up by the fact that there is support within the Star for the basic trade union rights that we need to take forward, which are well illustrated in the manifesto that was produced by the Institute. And I think that those two things combined give us a truthful view, which too many trade unionists don't actually know what's going on even in their own industries.
Yeah. Well, it was very interesting that you were mentioning what's happening in social care and the conditions, particularly for one of the people that are suffering from cuts, but also from the workers that that are delivering that care under very difficult circumstances. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to sort of say about that.
Well, how are you ever going to have a quality care service when the people who are supposed to be providing that quality care are so exploited themselves? And I mean, the idea that you can go into someone's home, get them up, get them washed, get them dressed, give them breakfast, and do that in 15 minutes while trying to maintain some kind of relationship with them is utterly ridiculous. So until we actually get away from a model of care, which is, it's only good for one people, that's the people who own these places. Yeah. It's not about the carers, it's certainly not about the people who are being given the care.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And you mentioned in your speech about the Morning Star being really the only voice for working class people in this country, and it's important to get working class voices across in the media. I don't know if you wanted to say a little bit more about that, the role of the Star in the coming struggle.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's been very obvious to everybody who's been part of the current left resurgence around Jeremy Corbyn and so on, that the media is part of the problem in this country, that the newspapers are overwhelmingly owned by a small number of very rich men who are politically representative of their own interests, which is the interests of the super rich. Now that's why the media is wall-to-wall hostile to Jeremy Corbyn. That's why they've rubbished socialist ideas. That's why they've piled on smear after smear to any attempt to actually change the balance of force in this country, to change the country for the better for working people. So it's really important that we have a newspaper that's not owned by the bosses, that's owned by ordinary people like the Morning Star, a cooperative that anyone can have a share in, and which has an elected management committee which holds its editor to account, so it's not answering to some tycoon. It's a democratic paper, a cooperative paper, and I think that that's an irreplaceable thing in the British press.
And obviously very important in the coming few months and the coming years of struggle ahead.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn has said that the Morning Star is the most precious voice we have in the daily media, and I think, he understands that it's the only paper that will give his politics a hearing. There may be other papers that will occasionally pose left or flirt with some aspects of that, but we've seen even those papers that were supposedly on the left took this anti-Corbyn line. Even the Daily Mirror had a front page demanding that he resign. We've seen loads and loads of articles in The Guardian slagging him off and so on. It's because these are papers that are commercial operations, big commercial operations, even where they're not owned by a tycoon. That affects the way that they publicise stories, that affects their story priorities. And the Morning Star has a very different content to any of these other papers. If you're interested in what working people are doing, if you're interested in trade union activities, it's the only paper that covers this stuff. It's the only paper that, when there's a strike on, goes to the people on strike for their account of what's going on, rather than the account of the bosses.
That's great. Thanks very much, Ben.
Thanks.
And here we are at the heart of workers' organisations at the Trade Union Congress. I'd like to thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and please keep in touch and make sure that you get your copy of the Morning Star.